James Poulos recently wrote about this for The Week, and where he is, by the way, a contributing columnist and senior contributor to The Federalist. He joins me in the studio. We'll talk about that, a lot of other things. In your recent piece for The Week, you wrote that recent developments in Syria signal a fresh humiliation for America. What do you mean?
Well, if you think back, you might remember Barack Obama gets on television and says Assad's got to go, ruler of Syria. He's sort of the last domino to fall in the Arab Spring. The Obama administration really staked its credibility on getting Assad out. They drew a red line for no chemical weapons usage, and of course that happened. They had to backpedal. They thought they were going to go to Congress. They ended up not going to Congress, so it's been a step back. Now they've created a gap that's big enough for Russia to come in, and it just doesn't look good.
Did you want us to go in and take out Assad? What did you want us to do?
What I was hoping for from the administration was credibility. If you're going to plant that flag, you've got to follow through on the promise. If you're not going to follow through on the promise, you know, I think that,
do what?
That when Congress had the opportunity to pass a resolution that would send us into Syria, they turned it down. I think at the time that was the right thing to do. But if you're going to stay out of the ring, you need to be aware of what's going on in the ring. You can't step out, turn back around and see that Putin's coming in, and then expect everything to go well for you.
Okay, so we should have.
We should have stayed out, but we shouldn't have left the field, right? You can
stay out,
stand on the sidelines, ready to jump back into the game.
Okay, and what do you do on the sidelines?
Well, I think what you do is you train more than 5 Syrian rebels. You know, we've got these congressional hearings where the Pentagon basically admits, oh, we got 5 guys vetted, we sent them in. It was an embarrassment. It was almost as if the program was never intended to succeed. And if you're playing that kind of sort of triple three-dimensional chess, you've got to be more delicate about it, and you've got to be more clever about it.
Is there not a mood in this country, first of all, not to put troops on the ground in the Middle East anymore? Isn't there a mood in America to say, pox on all of you?
Yeah, I think there is. I think you see that in Donald Trump, and I think you see that in Bernie Sanders' campaign. You know, he doesn't even have a foreign policy section of his webpage. So there is a mood, and the mood is, you know, we've dumped a ton of money, and we've dumped our fair share of blood into the Mideast. We've left a lot of casualties behind. What do we have to show for it? One thing that we had to show for it was, well, at least there isn't a sort of caliphate in the making. Then ISIS comes along, and that was another one where the administration underestimated what was happening.
That's an offshoot of going into Iraq, which was a major mistake.
Well,
do you know anybody defending going into Iraq?
I think that actually Donald Trump got it right, where he said we shouldn't have gone in and we shouldn't have gotten out. You know,
well, what does that mean?
It means that you leave enough of a presence there so that ISIS can't sort of sweep in and almost take out Baghdad. It's been another embarrassment. So we've had this series of missteps where it looks like the administration can't anticipate what's going to happen.
But they've been missteps by 2 administrations.
Yes, that's right. And so, yeah, people expected that Obama's administration would be able to get a handle on the Mideast in the way that Bush did not. Hasn't proven to be the case.
Now, what do you think Putin's doing? What does he want?
Russia has...
You're guessing. We don't know.
We're guessing, but we do know that Russia has a pretty bad hand, all things considered. For a major power, they're quite weak. Their economy is very weak. Their currency's never very stable. And they've got these sort of frozen conflicts that are thawing along their southern borders, whether it was Chechnya or whether it's what's going on in eastern Ukraine right now. It's easy to look at Putin and say this is a guy who's just out to make trouble, but I think he's trying to play the best of a bad hand. He's got a pretty good military. He can put that to use where he's able. Other places he has to settle for little nibbles here and there. He's not going to sweep in and take over all of Ukraine. He's not going to invade the Baltic states. Even though he could, you know, NATO planners are now embarrassed to admit that they don't really have a plan in place to successfully defend the Balkans. And these the Baltic states, and these are NATO members.
So since that's not what he wants, and we're guessing, what does he want?
I would imagine that if
he's inclined, he would lose men.
He would, but I'm sure he's willing to let a few of them go. But if he can project power successfully into the Mideast, it gets Russia out of this box where, you know, Putin looks at Europe, and what does he see? He sees a couple of big countries there, France, Germany, some others, who want Russian oil, who want to pay for Russian oil, and they want that pipeline to keep flowing. It's not going to work for him to turn up the heat on Europe so much that those countries start to lose faith in Russian oil.
You've suggested, James, in your writing that other countries might see an opening to act in other regions without fear or concern about America's response.
Well, sure. We've already got China and the South China Sea building their fake islands and setting them up for military occupation. They want to turn the South China Sea into a Chinese lake, and so our allies in the region are worried about that. And you know, if there are enough crises going on all at the same time, It's sort of like, the police can't arrest everyone in a riot, and the United States isn't going to be able to manage the complexity of a world in which we've got, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 crises going at once.
Do we want to manage all these things? See, that's one of the problems, James. I'm asking it as a question, not as an opinion. Are we in a mood to say, screw it?
You can't just screw it. It would be nice. It would be nice if we could screw it without consequence. But when we're the last superpower standing and we have a change of heart and say, you know what, we've been doing this for 10 years and we're sick of it, that actually could and probably would unleash a degree of chaos that I think the American people would pretty quickly realize was not to their liking either.
What do you think do we do with the refugee problem?
So
we're taking in, well, how many?
Sure. The administration has sort of laid out a timetable, and it's not a huge number. It grows over time, and timetables are made to be broken in that sense. So I would be surprised if the numbers that are being thrown around right now for the total of 100,000 or so actually turn out to be what it is. But the mere fact that there is the refugee problem, that there is, I think, is a pretty harsh condemnation of not just American policy when it comes to a place like Libya, but Europe as well. France led the charge into Libya, and in a way that made sense. One of the reasons to get rid of Gaddafi was because he was going to perpetuate this huge refugee crisis, march into Benghazi, and everyone would jump on boats, and it would be a nightmare. And so we wound up with the same nightmare.
So, what happens to the refugees? What happens to these people?
I think they will gradually be absorbed into Europe. That's where most of them want to be, and there are enough Europeans and enough European governments who are prepared to deal with that. Hungary isn't very happy about the refugees. They're building walls. They're bringing out the troops. But Hungary has never set the tone for European policy, and I don't think they'll do it now.
What did you make of Netanyahu's speech at the UN?
Well, it was certainly buzzworthy. It's not every day that that strong and intensive silence is sort of captured on the cameras. It was unbelievable. So it gave fodder to his to his foes, who could put on whatever sort of ridiculous music they want. You can see the clips on YouTube. But it did underscore the point, which is Israel is sort of standing on the front lines when it comes to the fate of the Mideast, and if no one's calling the shots in a way that the global sort of leading world powers are used to, then it's going to make Israel nervous, and it's natural that they're going to express that concern.
But he did say America is still his greatest friend and his strongest ally, and he's meeting with Obama next month at the White House.
He is. There's no way out of that. But he's also flying to Moscow to meet with Putin. If Putin was smart, he would tell Netanyahu not to worry. Of course, Putin can't single-handedly determine what Iran's going to do, but there's a place where I think many Americans would breathe a sigh of relief if Russia and Israel found a way to maintain.
Do you expect the American election to change that one way or the other?
Well, I think one way or the other we're going to get a more hawkish president, unless Bernie Sanders rolls in, which right now still seems like an outside possibility.
Hillary would be more hawkish.
She would, and she's already started to telegraph that.
Oh. So, and you favor that?
Oh, I think in general, yes. But even more important than being more generically hawkish, I think, is to just have a crisper and more clearly communicated grand strategy. Right now, people don't know what the administration is doing or why.
The NSA leaker Edward Snowden is still living under a grant of asylum in Russia, and he's got his own Twitter account. And you called social media Snowden just one more celebrity saying vapid things into a megaphone. Good line.
It's sad a little bit, really. I mean, Edward Snowden, love him or hate him, had some sort of stature, some gravitas to him, even though he was very, very young and not sort of the typical mover of world events that we're used to. But the minute you set foot on Twitter, you're sort of cracking jokes with celebrities and popular scientists, and it's just. I think it's a reminder that social media oftentimes allows things to be said that don't focus the mind. They really sort of distract us from the main issues we should be thinking about.
I even tweeted something you might have liked. Ed Snowden joined Twitter and began following the NSA, so he's watching the watchers watching him. Even Tom Clancy would have gotten dizzy with this.
Tom Clancy, yes. I mean, he sort of gave us a hint of what was to come, but it's hard to envision what's going on now. I mean, you got the CIA opening a whole new directorate dedicated to big data and to digital analysis.
You've been a critic of social media, right?
Well, if you're going to play the game, you have to be able to critique the game, I think.
Well, the problem is, what can you do about it? I mean, technology has overwhelmed us, right? It is what it is.
This is a real problem, and I think it goes pretty deep. You know, I wrote that piece critical of Snowden and how social media turns people into these, you know, they're not heroes, they're just sort of celebrities. Not that there's anything wrong with being a celebrity, but when everyone is sort of participating in this mass
everyone's a
celebratory
journalist.
environment.
Everyone.
Yeah, it does tend to cheapen things, and I got one sort of comment that came back to me as a result of writing that was, well, you're a hypocrite because you're also just trying to get clicks by criticizing this machine that gets clicks.
You're in a no-win then.
Right. So so the alternative is, and this is what a lot of sort of the more successful people are doing, is they just pull up the ladders. They they do a little bit of PR when they have to tend their social media garden, and they don't open up, they don't share, and that that increases a certain kind of social inequality that is going to be a new problem for us, I think.
What's your read on Trump?
This hasn't been the greatest month for Donald Trump, but it hasn't been the worst either. He's got some staying power. He just needs to figure out what to do with it. One thing that he can't do with it is talk about things that he doesn't understand. So when he says, it's actually great that Putin's going into Syria because he's going to attack ISIS for us, and then Putin seems to go out of his way not to attack ISIS and hit the Syrian rebels, and to allow Turkey to go after the Kurds, that's a pretty stark example of a candidate not knowing what they're talking about.
Why are the three leading pollsters in the Republican campaign all people who've never held office?
Oh, I think there's an appetite for someone who hasn't been completely absorbed into the Washington system. But I also think, this is the moment where you can sort of voice your discontent with the system without really very much consequence. There's a lot of sort of hand-wringing in the media, on the cable TV stations. But the primary season's going to roll on, and Marco Rubio's notching his way up the polls. Jeb Bush is hanging in there. There's a lot of money that hasn't been spent yet as we go into the fourth quarter. All the super PACs are going to get ready to unload. So it's still early in the campaign, and I think people will, as they do, come around to vote for the nominee.
Do you see what eventual nominee do you see?
Oh gosh, if I had to bet right now, I think Marco Rubio's got the momentum right now.
I see where Jeb Bush is bringing George W. into the campaign.
Yes, that's right. There's been an interesting brother dynamic there, which there always is when you have family members in politics.
It'll be an interesting year.
Yeah, it remains to be seen how that'll be received.
Always good seeing you, James.
Likewise.
Thanks to James Poulos for joining us today. For more information on James' writing, check out theweek.com or keep updated with him on Twitter. His handle is @JamesPoulos, Poulos.